It was a hot, busy afternoon in the city. Cars rushed down the streets, and people hurried to get home. The sun beat down, and the streets felt crowded, yet strangely quiet, as if everyone was trying to avoid something they couldn't see. The sound of honking horns and the hum of engines filled the air. It was just another ordinary day, or so it seemed. Then, a loud, desperate cry broke the calm. "Help! Please help me!" The sound was sharp, piercing through the noise of the city. It came from the sidewalk ahead, where a small, crying girl stood, clutching her chest in fear. Her eyes were wide, and her cheeks were streaked with tears. She was alone. No parents, no friends, just the cold, empty streets. Officer Daniel Thomas, who was on duty that afternoon, was the first to hear the scream. His patrol car was parked at the red light, waiting for the signal to change. He quickly glanced around, looking for the source of the noise. The girl was standing near a bus stop, her tiny body trembling as if she were freezing in the heat. Before he could even react, she ran towards his car, her small legs moving as fast as they could. "Please, please help me," she shouted again, her voice breaking. She wasn't just crying, she was panicking. As if she had nowhere else to go, she reached out and grabbed Officer Thomas's leg, her grip tight and desperate. "Hey, it's okay," Officer Thomas said gently, his heart instantly going out to her. "What's wrong? Where's your mom?" He crouched down to her level, trying to comfort her, but she only shook her head violently. "She's not my mom," the girl screamed. "She's not my mom. She's lying." Her voice was filled with raw fear, and her words left Thomas in shock. Officer Thomas stood up quickly, scanning the area. Just across the street, a woman was walking towards them, her steps quick and sharp. She was calling out, "Come here, honey. Don't be scared. I'm your mom. I'm your mom." But the girl backed away from the woman, her eyes wide in terror. "No, you're not my mom. I don't know you," she cried, her tiny body trembling even more now. The woman stopped a few feet away, looking both annoyed and confused. "Don't be silly, sweetheart. I'm your mom. You're just scared. Everything's okay now. Come here." The woman reached her arms out, but the girl took a step back. "No, you're not my mom," the girl yelled again, and Thomas could see the raw panic in her eyes. He looked at the woman carefully. She didn't look like she was lying, but her expression was tense. Something about her seemed off. "Ma'am, I need you to step back," Officer Thomas said firmly, his voice calm but strong. "I'm going to take her to the station to figure this out." The woman raised an eyebrow. "What? That's ridiculous. She's just upset. I'm her mom. I told you." She sounded defensive now, almost angry. But Thomas was used to seeing people get defensive when they were hiding something. His instincts told him there was more to this situation than it appeared. "Ma'am, please step back," he repeated, this time his voice more authoritative. He turned to the girl and knelt down again, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Hey, it's okay. I'm going to help you, okay? You're safe now." The girl looked at him, her face still wet with tears, but there was a tiny bit of relief in her eyes. She nodded slowly. "She's not my mom. She's lying," the girl whispered again, her voice shaking. "Okay," Officer Thomas said, his mind racing. He gently took the girl's hand and led her to the car, making sure to keep the woman in his sights. The woman stood still for a moment, watching them, then turned and walked away, muttering under her breath. "Let's get you to the station," Thomas said, helping the girl into the backseat. As he started the car, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why had the girl been so sure that the woman wasn't her mother? What was going on? As they drove, the girl stayed quiet, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her torn shirt. Officer Thomas tried to comfort her with small talk, but she didn't respond. Her mind seemed to be somewhere far away, lost in the fear and confusion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the car pulled into the police station. Officer Thomas turned to the girl, who was staring out the window, her hands nervously playing with the edge of her shirt. "Do you have a name?" he asked softly. "Maya," the girl whispered, still not looking at him. "Maya," he repeated, taking a deep breath. "Maya, do you know where your parents are?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness. I don't know," she said quietly. "I don't know where they are. I just know she's not my mom." Thomas nodded, his mind spinning. He was going to get to the bottom of this. He had to. Something told him that this little girl's story was far from over, and he wasn't about to let it end in a mystery. The police station was a quiet place, with the usual hum of phones ringing and officers talking in the background. But inside the small interrogation room, the air felt thick, heavy with questions. Officer Thomas had led Maya into the room, making sure she was seated comfortably. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to unfold. "Do you want some water, Maya?" he asked, his voice gentle as he placed a glass of water in front of her. She shook her head, her eyes still filled with uncertainty. "I just want to go home," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Of course," Thomas said, nodding. "We'll figure this out, I promise." Maya sat with her head down, her small hands trembling slightly. Officer Thomas could tell she was scared, but there was something else in her expression. She wasn't just afraid of the situation. She was afraid of something deeper, something she wasn't ready to talk about. As the minutes passed, Thomas couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The woman who had claimed to be Maya's mother wasn't just lying about being her parent. There was more to the story. He had been a cop long enough to recognize when something didn't add up, and this situation screamed that something was wrong. Before Thomas could speak again, the door to the room opened and another officer entered. "Got the information you asked for," the officer said, handing him a file. Thomas took the file and flipped it open, his eyes scanning the details. It was about the woman. Her name was Karen Miller. Maya's mother, according to Karen, had been a complete stranger to the little girl. But the file told a different story. It was a list of allegations, charges, and complaints, some of them more serious than others. The name on the file caught Thomas's attention. Karen Miller had been involved in multiple suspicious cases in the past, including a history of adopting children and then abandoning them. She had been involved in foster care programs, but had been reported several times for neglecting the children under her care. That was enough to raise the hairs on the back of Thomas's neck. "Maya," Thomas said, kneeling down in front of her, "I need you to trust me. I have some information that might help us understand what happened today. Can you tell me what you know about the woman who was with you?" Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but closed it again, her lips trembling. Thomas could see she was struggling with her words, torn between fear and the need to be understood. "I don't know her," Maya finally said, her voice breaking. "She's not my mom. She just came to get me." "Where did she come from?" Thomas pressed gently, his tone patient. She came to the group home," Maya said, her voice soft. She wiped her eyes, her small hands still shaking. "I don't know why she said she was my mom. I don't know why she wanted me to go with her. But I don't remember my real mom. I just know she isn't the one." Thomas's heart sank as he heard the words. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Maya had been in foster care for as long as she could remember, and now it seemed that Karen Miller had taken an interest in her. But why? What had this woman's real motives been? Before Thomas could respond, there was another knock on the door. This time, the person who entered was the chief of police, Chief Sandra Williams. She had been briefed on the situation and was eager to get to the bottom of it. Chief Williams was known for her tough demeanor, but Thomas could tell she was concerned. "Maya," Chief Williams said, sitting down across from the girl, "I know you're scared, but we need to get the truth. Can you tell us everything you remember about the woman who took you?" Maya hesitated, her eyes darting between the two officers. She came when I was at the group home, she said quietly. She said I could come live with her. She said she was going to take care of me, that I wouldn't have to be in the home anymore. But when I said I didn't want to go with her, she got angry. She told me I had to. And I didn't know what to do. Thomas's mind raced. The woman had come to the group home. But why Maya? Why this child? There were many children there, and Maya wasn't the only one who needed a place to stay. What had made her the target? The questions were piling up, but Maya's story only made the situation more complicated. Did she tell you why she picked you? Chief Williams asked, trying to piece together the puzzle. Maya shook her head. No, she just said it was my chance to leave the group home. I didn't want to go. I was scared. Thomas took a deep breath, trying to make sense of it all. He looked back at Maya, who was still trembling in her seat. You did the right thing coming to us, Maya. You're safe now. But as Thomas said the words, a sick feeling crept over him. There was something about this whole situation that didn't sit right. The woman had acted too quickly, too forcefully, and there were far too many questions left unanswered. Just then, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his heart skipped a beat. The information that had just come in was about to change everything. The name at the top of the new report made Thomas freeze. It was Karen Miller's real name, and the connection was something he hadn't expected. She wasn't just a foster parent. She was part of a much larger operation that had been under investigation for years. Maya, listen to me carefully, Officer Thomas said, his voice firm but kind. We need to make sure you're safe, but there's something we need to look into. Can you tell me everything you remember about the woman? Anything at all? Maya nodded slowly, her eyes wide. I think I remember something. She said she knew my real mom. She said I was special. That's why she wanted me. Thomas and Chief Williams exchanged a glance. This was getting stranger by the minute. The words Maya had just spoken echoed in Officer Thomas's mind. She said I was special. That's why she wanted me. Those words, innocent as they seemed, felt like a jigsaw puzzle piece that didn't fit. Officer Thomas and Chief Williams exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. There was something far deeper to this situation than they had originally realized. Thomas sat back in his chair, tapping his pen against the desk and thought, What do you mean, Maya? What did she say about your real mom? What made you special? He asked, his voice soft but firm. He needed to hear more, needed to understand why this woman had such an interest in Maya. Maya swallowed hard, wiping her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand. She hesitated for a long moment before speaking. She said my mom, my real mom, was someone important. She said I had her blood in me, that I was different from the other kids in the group home. Thomas and Chief Williams both leaned in, their expressions intense. Did she say anything else? Anything about your mom's name? Chief Williams asked, her tone cautious but curious. Maya shook her head, her brow furrowed in thought. No, she didn't say a name, just that she was someone powerful, someone with a lot of connections. Maya's voice quivered slightly as she spoke, clearly confused by the meaning of Karen Miller's cryptic words. The officers were silent for a moment, digesting what Maya had said. It was a strange statement, but something about it gnawed at Thomas. The more he thought about it, the more it sounded like Karen Miller wasn't just someone who wanted to adopt Maya. She was trying to claim her for another reason, a reason that involved more than just a child being taken out of a group home. Maya, you did the right thing coming to us, Officer Thomas said, his voice reassuring. But I need you to be brave for a moment, okay? Can you tell me if anything else about the situation stood out? Did she act strange in any way? Maya nodded slowly, her eyes distant as she thought back to the moment she had first met Karen. When I first saw her, she was really nice. She smiled at me, said she wanted to help me, that I wouldn't have to be in the group home anymore. But when I tried to say I wasn't ready to go with her, she got angry, like she was mad I didn't just go with her right away. She stopped and wiped a fresh tear from her cheek. She looked at me like I was something to be taken, like I wasn't even a person. A shiver ran down Officer Thomas's spine. This was no ordinary case. Maya wasn't just some girl being swept up into a stranger's life. This was something much darker. "Thank you, Maya," Chief Williams said softly. "You're being very brave right now." Thomas's mind raced as he processed the new information. Karen Miller's behavior was troubling, but the comment about Maya being special was the most disturbing. He had dealt with strange cases before, but nothing like this. The woman's words about Maya being different, about her real mom being important, all pointed to something much more serious than a simple case of kidnapping. But what? The chief stood up, her expression grave. "We're going to investigate Karen Miller. We're going to find out who she really is and what she wants with Maya." She turned to Thomas. "I'll have you go through her background. Something doesn't add up here." Thomas nodded, his mind still spinning. "We'll figure this out," he said quietly, but even as he spoke, his gut told him this was no ordinary case. Karen Miller was no ordinary woman. That night, after Maya had been safely placed in protective care, Thomas sat in his office, poring over Karen Miller's file. The deeper he dug, the more he began to understand how tangled this web was. Karen Miller wasn't just some woman with a foster care license. She had connections to high-profile individuals in both legal and political circles. There were reports of her being involved in shady dealings, but no concrete evidence to tie her to anything criminal. Until now, everything about her had been circumstantial. But now, everything had changed. As Thomas read more, he noticed something odd. One of the names mentioned in her file seemed familiar, too familiar. It was the name of a high-ranking government official, someone who had once been in charge of child welfare programs. But the connections didn't stop there. The name kept appearing, connected to people involved in the underground adoption ring, the one that had been quietly investigated for years, but never brought to the surface. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but the picture was far from clear. Who was Maya's real mother, and why had Karen Miller targeted her? And why did it feel like someone powerful was pulling the strings from behind the scenes? The next day, a breakthrough came. The DNA test results for Maya arrived. It was time to confront the truth. Maya's real mother was someone with far more power than anyone had imagined. The air in the police department felt thick with anticipation. Officer Thomas had spent the night poring over every detail he could find on Karen Miller, and what he had uncovered left him unsettled. He learned that Miller was far more connected than anyone had initially suspected. She was involved with people in powerful positions, and there were whispers about illegal activities tied to a vast underground operation that could potentially shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about the foster care system. The breakthrough came when the DNA results for Maya were finally in. Thomas sat at his desk, staring at the envelope in front of him. The results would change everything, he knew that. He had to open it. Slowly, he tore open the seal, unfolding the paper with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the results, and his heart stopped. The name on the document wasn't just any name. It was a name he had heard before, a name that had been linked to powerful figures, corruption, and politics. Maya's real mother was none other than Evelyn Wright, a woman who had vanished from public life years ago. Evelyn Wright was a well-known civil rights activist, once hailed as a hero for her work in fighting racial inequality. But then, suddenly, she disappeared without a trace. Rumors of her involvement in a larger political scandal had floated around, but no one had ever confirmed anything. Evelyn Wright was more than just a name from the past. She was a symbol of hope for many, a voice for the oppressed, and someone who had been carefully erased from history. And now, Evelyn Wright's daughter was sitting right in front of him. The implications of this discovery hit Thomas like a freight train. If Maya was truly Evelyn's daughter, then Karen Miller's interest in her was far more than that of a concerned foster parent. It was personal, it was political, and it was dangerous. Thomas immediately called Chief Williams into his office. As soon as she entered, He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Chief, I have the results," Thomas said, his voice grave. "Maya's mother is Evelyn Wright. The same Evelyn Wright who disappeared years ago." Williams's face went pale. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice low with disbelief. "I've confirmed it," Thomas replied. "Maya is her daughter." Williams took a step back, her mind racing. She had heard of Evelyn Wright, but had never connected her to this case. The civil rights activist had been a force for change, a beacon of hope for many black communities, but she was also controversial, especially given her disappearance. The fact that Maya, the young girl who had been caught in the middle of this strange case, was connected to such a high-profile figure was almost too much to comprehend. "How is this possible?" Williams asked, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know," Thomas admitted, shaking his head. "But we have to find out why Karen Miller was so interested in Maya. And more importantly, we need to figure out why Evelyn Wright disappeared and what it means for Maya." The two officers exchanged a look, both realizing the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a simple case of child abduction anymore. This was a web of secrets, power, and politics that they were only beginning to unravel. They couldn't let it go. They had to dig deeper. Later that day, the police team gathered for a meeting. Chief Williams was standing in front of a large whiteboard, filled with names and connections that they had painstakingly uncovered. There were links to powerful politicians, corporations, and organizations. Everything pointed back to one thing. Karen Miller was a key player in a much larger game. But what was the game, and what did Maya's mother have to do with it? "We need to locate Evelyn Wright," Chief Williams said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "And we need to find out what she knows. If Maya is her daughter, she's been hiding for a reason. And that reason is far bigger than we initially thought." Thomas nodded, his mind already working on how to track down Evelyn. He had to make sense of this mess. If Evelyn was still alive, then Maya's life had been put in danger not just by a kidnapper, but by a whole system of corruption and deceit. This was no longer just about rescuing Maya. It was about exposing the truth and bringing those responsible to justice. But where could they find Evelyn Wright? Thomas's mind flashed back to the one lead that had been overlooked until now. A letter. Maya had mentioned that Karen Miller had shown her a letter when they first met. A letter that Maya had not fully understood but said she could remember certain words. Thomas recalled Maya's vague description of the letter and decided to take a different approach. They had to get that letter. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, its second hand moving with the weight of time pressing down on everyone in the room. Officer Thomas had just come back from Karen Miller's house with that letter in his hand. The revelation of Evelyn Wright's connection to Maya was starting to feel like a heavy storm cloud, its dark presence looming over everyone. No one had expected this. Maya's simple plea had uncovered a tangled web of deceit and corruption that threatened to destroy everything in its path. As Thomas sat at his desk, his eyes moved between the letter and the case file spread across the table. The words in the letter felt like a puzzle piece that had just fallen into place. Maya is the key to everything. That sentence echoed in his mind as he tried to process it. What did it mean? How was Maya, an innocent child, involved in such a complex conspiracy? His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. He picked it up without hesitation, his heart already racing. "Officer Thomas," the voice on the other end said, sharp and urgent. It was Detective Harris, a colleague from another department. "We found her. Evelyn Wright. She's alive." The blood in Thomas's veins seemed to freeze for a moment. The woman everyone had assumed was dead for years had resurfaced, and it wasn't a coincidence that this was happening now. Evelyn Wright's return could either bring the truth to light or shatter it forever. "I'm on my way," Thomas replied quickly, his voice tight with determination. He hung up the phone and grabbed his jacket, heading straight for the police car. As the sirens wailed through the streets, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something enormous was about to unfold. The drive to the address Detective Harris had provided seemed to take longer than it should have. Thomas's mind raced, thinking of every possible scenario. Evelyn Wright was no ordinary person. She was a symbol of resistance, of everything that had been hidden from the public eye. And now she was connected to Maya. But why had she disappeared all those years ago? Why hadn't she come forward sooner? As Thomas arrived at the dilapidated house on the outskirts of town, he couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This house was far from the typical place someone would expect to find a civil rights activist. It looked abandoned, almost forgotten. But Thomas knew better. If Evelyn Wright had been in hiding, she had chosen this place for a reason. He knocked on the door, his heart hammering in his chest. After a long pause, the door creaked open, revealing a woman who looked far older than the photos he had seen of her from years ago. Her hair was streaked with gray, and her face, once filled with hope and determination, now showed the strain of years of hiding. "You're Officer Thomas?" Evelyn asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "Yes," Thomas replied, his tone cautious. "We need to talk." Evelyn stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. As Thomas stepped into the house, the faint smell of dust and neglect filled his nose. It felt like a forgotten place, yet every corner of the room seemed to have been carefully preserved, as if the walls themselves were hiding secrets. "Sit," Evelyn said quietly, gesturing to the chairs in the corner. She had lived here for years, but this wasn't the home of a woman in hiding. It was a home built on the foundation of a hidden truth. Thomas sat, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a conversation. This was the beginning of something far greater, something that would change everything. "Why did you disappear?" Thomas asked, his voice low. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Evelyn looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and regret. She took a deep breath before speaking, as though weighing every word. "I had to protect her," Evelyn said, her voice soft but firm. "Maya was always meant to be the one who would carry the message. Her birth was not a mistake. It was planned carefully. I was part of something much bigger than I could ever explain, something that couldn't be stopped. The people who wanted to use her didn't care about who she was. They only cared about her potential. They wanted to control the narrative, control the power she carried in her blood." Thomas's mind spun as he absorbed her words. He had always known there was something special about Maya, but hearing it from Evelyn herself made everything feel so much more real. Maya wasn't just a child caught in the middle of a chaotic foster care system. She was the product of something far more dangerous. But what was this something Evelyn was talking about? What did Maya's blood hold? "I had to go into hiding," Evelyn continued, her voice trembling now. "It wasn't safe for either of us. Maya is part of something they want to use for power. But I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let them control her. I had to protect her from everything, even if it meant disappearing." Thomas stood up, his thoughts racing. Everything Evelyn had said was starting to make sense, but it raised even more questions. Who were they? And what was the power they wanted to control? Before he could ask more, the door suddenly burst open. Officer Harris rushed in, breathless, a look of urgency on his face. "We found her," Harris said. "Maya. She's gone." Thomas's heart sank. He had to act fast. Evelyn's warnings, her plea to protect Maya, had been real. Someone had taken her. The race was on to find Maya before the forces that wanted to control her could use her for their own dark purposes. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting long shadows across the city streets. Thomas sat in his car, staring at the road ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel. His mind was racing. Maya was out there somewhere. But where? Who had taken her, and why? Evelyn had told him that Maya was more than just a child caught in a system. She was part of something much bigger, something that could change everything. But Evelyn couldn't explain it fully. Now time was running out, and every second that passed brought them closer to a dangerous unknown. Detective Harris sat beside him, his face grim as he glanced at the map spread out on the dashboard. "We need to move fast. Whoever took her knows we're onto them. We're dealing with people who aren't afraid to do anything to get what they want." Thomas nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know, but we don't even know who they are. All we know is that Maya is the key to something, and we don't have much time." The car sped down the road, weaving through traffic. The urgency was palpable, but despite the pressing danger, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer. He had to believe that. He had to believe they could save Maya before it was too late. Hours passed, and the search intensified. Police forces were mobilized. The city was on edge. Everyone seemed to know something was wrong, but no one truly understood what was happening. Meanwhile, Thomas and Harris pieced together what little they knew, trying to make sense of Evelyn's cryptic warnings. They knew one thing for sure: Maya had to be found, and fast. At the same time, Evelyn had gone into hiding again. She'd left a series of messages for Thomas, but every time he tried to reach her, there was nothing. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air, just as she had done years ago. Thomas's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out quickly, his heart racing. The message was short, and the sender was anonymous. "She's at the old warehouse on Birch Street. You're too late." His breath caught in his throat. The old warehouse. Birch Street. It was a rundown part of town, one that was far from any usual police routes. The message was clear: Maya was in danger, and someone wanted them to know they were too late. "We need to go there now," Thomas said, slamming the phone back into his pocket. He floored the gas pedal and took a sharp turn onto the side street that led to Birch. When they arrived at the warehouse, the air was thick with tension. The place was dark, abandoned, and silent. No one was in sight. Thomas's eyes scanned the area, trying to see anything that would give him a clue. Every shadow felt like it could be hiding someone. Every creak of the building felt like a warning. "Stay close," Thomas warned Harris as they both got out of the car and crept toward the entrance. The dim light of their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating old crates and rusting metal. The smell of mildew filled the air. They entered cautiously, every step making the floorboards creak beneath them. The silence was unsettling. They hadn't seen anyone yet, but something felt off. It was as if they were being watched. Suddenly, they heard a faint sound, a soft cry. It was almost imperceptible, but Thomas's heart skipped a beat. He turned to Harris, his eyes wide. The sound had come from deeper inside the warehouse. They followed the noise, moving as quietly as possible. The sound grew louder as they reached the back of the building. And then, just as they rounded a corner, they saw her. Maya was standing in the middle of the room, her back to them, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She was trembling, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. The moment Thomas saw her, all of the dread and worry he'd been carrying for hours melted into relief. But it was short-lived. There was someone else in the room. The tension in the warehouse was palpable. Maya stood at the center of the room, her eyes darting between the man who had threatened her and the officers who had come to her rescue. Thomas could feel the weight of every second that passed. Every movement, every breath felt like it could change the course of everything. He was trying to stay calm, to think clearly, but his mind was racing. This moment was more than just a rescue. It was the culmination of everything. The truth, the secrets, the dark forces at play. "Step aside," the man growled, his voice filled with venom. He took another step forward, but Thomas held his ground, blocking his path to Maya. "I told you already," Thomas said, his voice calm but firm. "You're not taking her anywhere. Not now, not ever." The man's lips curled into a twisted smile. "You think you're in control of this situation. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Maya is not just some innocent child. She's part of something much bigger." "I don't care about your plans," Thomas replied coldly. "What matters is that she's safe. Now you're going to walk out of here, or things will get a lot worse for you." The man chuckled darkly, clearly not intimidated. He reached into his jacket, and for a split second, Thomas thought he was going for a weapon. But the man pulled out a phone instead. He held it up, showing the screen to Thomas. "This is not over," the man said, his voice low. "You don't know what's coming next. You don't know what Maya means." Before Thomas could react, the man hit a button on the phone, and a series of images flashed up on the screen. They were pictures of Maya, shots of her from different angles, photos of her in places she had never been. The images were disturbing. Some of them showed her near locations Thomas had never seen before. Others were pictures of her with people who had nothing to do with her life. Strangers. People with dangerous looks in their eyes. "What are these?" Thomas demanded, his heart pounding in his chest. The man sneered at him. "These are just a glimpse of what's coming. We've been watching her. We know everything about her. And she's going to be part of something much more dangerous than you can imagine." Thomas stepped forward, but Harris, who had been standing beside him, stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "Don't let him provoke you. We have to think this through. The last thing we want is to let him get away." The man's smirk deepened, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had been too confident for too long. And now, as the truth began to unfold, he was starting to realize that his grip on the situation was slipping. "Listen to me carefully," the man said, lowering the phone. "You don't know who I am, or who Maya truly is. This game isn't over. She's just the beginning." Harris spoke up, his voice steady but firm. "We're done talking. You're under arrest for kidnapping and endangering a minor. You can either come peacefully, or we'll have to make you." For a moment, the man's eyes narrowed, calculating. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, trying to grab Maya. But Thomas was faster. He reached out and pulled Maya behind him, shielding her with his body. "Not this time," Thomas said through gritted teeth. Harris, acting quickly, aimed his gun at the man. "Stay back. Don't make me use this." The man hesitated, then cursed under his breath. He looked at the exit, but the way was blocked by the officers. It was clear that his escape was no longer an option. Thomas didn't wait for him to make another move. He moved swiftly, grabbing the man by the arm and twisting it behind his back. The man grunted in pain, but Thomas didn't let go. "You're going to tell me everything," Thomas said, his voice cold with determination. "Every last thing. And you're going to tell it to the people who can make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." The man snarled but said nothing. He wasn't going to make it easy, but that was fine with Thomas. He wasn't going to let this man threaten anyone else, not after everything he had done to Maya, and to the others. As Harris handcuffed the man, Thomas turned to Maya. She was still trembling, but there was something different in her eyes now. The fear had faded, replaced with something stronger. It wasn't just relief, it was defiance. "You're safe now," Thomas said softly, kneeling beside her. He could see the strength in her, even through the fear that still lingered. "I'm so sorry it took this long, but you're going to be okay now. I promise." Maya nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. I was scared. I didn't know who I could trust. But now I know you won't let them hurt me." Thomas's heart ached. He had seen so much in his years as a cop, but nothing had ever affected him the way this had. Maya wasn't just a victim. She was someone who had survived the impossible. And now she had a chance at a future. She had a chance at a life that was hers to live, free from fear. "I'll protect you," Thomas promised, "as long as you need." The weight of the moment was suffocating. Maya sat in the small, dimly lit room, her body still shaking with the remnants of fear. The air seemed thick, heavy with everything that had just happened. The chaos, the danger, the shock of it all. The sound of the police officers' footsteps echoed as they moved in and out of the room, making it feel even more isolating. Thomas stood by the door, his back against the frame, his eyes never leaving Maya. He had seen so much in his years on the force, but nothing had shaken him like this. He had seen criminals, seen horrors, but this was different. This was about a child, a helpless soul who had been dragged into something far beyond her understanding. As he stood there, Maya finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I never knew," she whispered, not looking up from the table. "I never knew who my real parents were. I didn't know why I was always different, why I was always so alone." Thomas stepped forward, pulling up a chair next to her. "You don't have to be alone anymore. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Maya. It's over." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something else behind the sadness. A spark, a flicker of hope, buried deep but there nonetheless. The door opened quietly, and Harris walked in, holding a folder. His face was serious, and his eyes were focused. "We got the results, Thomas," he said quietly, placing the folder on the table between them. Thomas looked at him, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been waiting for this moment. The truth, the thing that would explain everything. Harris opened the folder slowly, and the silence in the room felt louder than anything else. "Go ahead," Thomas said, his voice tight with anticipation. "What's in there?" Harris didn't answer at first. He looked at Maya, his expression softening. "Maya, this is going to be hard to hear, but it's important. The DNA tests confirm it." Maya's breath hitched in her throat, her hands trembling as she gripped the table. "What does it say? Who am I?" Thomas reached out, placing a hand on hers for comfort, trying to give her some measure of strength. She didn't pull away. "Your biological father. He's a cop, Maya," Harris finally said. "He's one of the officers working in the same department. He's been involved in some dangerous things, but we've just discovered that he's not the man you thought he was." Maya's eyes widened. "A cop? But why didn't he ever come for me? Why didn't he protect me?" Thomas glanced at Harris, who gave him a slight nod. He didn't need to explain. They had known from the start that this wasn't just about a missing child. It was about something bigger, something hidden, buried deep beneath layers of corruption. "The man who took you," Harris continued, "he was trying to keep you from your father. They don't want anyone to know the truth about who you are. They've been covering it up for years, making sure you were kept away from the family you deserved." Maya stared at the table, her thoughts whirling in her mind. Her father, a cop, someone who had the power to protect her, had been kept from her all this time. It didn't make sense. Everything she had believed about her past was a lie. Thomas could see the pain in her eyes. He didn't know how to make this better. He didn't know how to erase all the suffering she had been through. But he did know one thing. He wouldn't leave her side. Not now. Not ever. Maya stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window, her back turned to the room. The night outside was quiet, the streets bathed in the pale light of the street lamps. "I don't know if I can trust anyone," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust myself. I feel like everything I thought I knew is wrong." Thomas stood and joined her at the window, looking out with her. The city below seemed so small, so distant from everything they had just uncovered. But that distance was an illusion. Everything was connected, and now Maya had to understand that her future was in her hands. She could either let this consume her, or she could fight back. "You're stronger than you know, Maya," Thomas said quietly, his voice filled with determination. "This is your chance. This is your life now. You don't have to let your past define you. You have the power to choose who you want to be." Maya turned to face him, her eyes red from crying. But there was something different in her gaze now, something more. "And you're not going to leave me, are you?" "No," Thomas answered firmly. "I won't. Not now. Not ever." Harris stepped forward, offering her a reassuring smile. "We'll help you. You're not alone in this. You have people who care about you now. You have a future to look forward to." For the first time in a long while, Maya allowed herself to believe it. The weight in her chest, the suffocating fear, began to lift just a little. She was still shaking, but she wasn't alone. She wasn't fighting this battle by herself anymore. "I don't know what comes next," Maya said quietly, "but I think I can face it now." Thomas smiled, his heart swelling with pride for this brave young woman who had been through so much. "We'll take it one step at a time. Together." The room was quiet for a moment, and the only sound was the distant hum of the city. The truth had come to light. The secrets had been revealed. And now Maya had the chance to write her own story. The story of a survivor, of a fighter. And for the first time in her life, she could feel a glimmer of hope rising within her, something she hadn't felt in so long. She wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor.